Hi friends, Pastor Evan here. Thank you for joining me today as we are continuing our walk through the book of Romans. We're in chapter 5, starting in verse 12 and going through 21 today. Today I'm reading out of the Voice translation. I love this translation of the scriptures because what it does is it doesn't dumb down the scripture, but it actually brings back some of that poetic voice that would have been present in the original languages that we've lost in some of the translations that we use today. And so it's a really beautiful one to read, especially aloud. And I want to read a little bit here out of this passage as Paul talks about the consequences of sin and the great gift that Jesus has given us. He says in verse 12, "Consider this, sin entered our world through one man, Adam. And through sin, death followed in hot pursuit. Death spread rapidly to infect all people on earth as they engaged in sin." So once again, Paul's laying out the effect of sin and how it spreads and does its work that ends in death in humanity. And then he starts talking about how the law is given to Moses, and the law doesn't create sin, but it points it out, right? If we don't know we're making a mistake until someone shows us the rule book. And so this is what the law does. And then he talks about the difference between Adam introducing sin into our bloodline as humanity and Jesus introducing salvation and power over sin through his gift on the cross. And it says this in verse 15, "For if the one man's sin brings death to so many, how much more does the gift of God's radical grace extend to humanity since Jesus, the Anointed, offered his generous gift? His free gift is nothing like the scourge of the first man's sin. The judgment that fell because of the one false step brought condemnation. But the free gift, following countless offenses, results in a favorable verdict, not guilty." I love how it says that after countless offenses, we are given a favorable verdict. I can't think of a better way to put into a sentence the work of Christ on our behalf in salvation, is that after countless offenses, we've been given a favorable verdict. Driving to Portland, you'll see, I can't remember which bridge it is, but it's one of the raising bridges. And on the sides of this bridge, on the portion that rises up so that ships can navigate underneath it, there are these massive counterweights. And of course, the way it works is these massive weights hang on the side of the bridge so that there's just minimal effort needed to raise and lower that bridge. It balances it out. And the word picture that Paul is giving us here when it comes to sin and grace is that for so long, sin was so heavy and it was just weighing down the scales of humanity. You know, we just couldn't compete with the weight of sin leading to death. And when Jesus comes on the scene and gives us a free gift of his grace, what it does is it first evens out the sin, right? His grace is enough to cover over these countless offenses. But then Paul goes further and he says this at the end of today's passage. He says, when the law came into the picture, sin grew and grew, but wherever sin grew and spread, God's grace was there in fuller, greater measure. No matter how much sin crept in, there was always more grace. And so the picture we have, like that bridge and the counterweights, is not just that it evens it out, but that grace continues to win and outweigh sin. And when I look around in the world today and I consider all of the conflicts and trouble that we face, and so many of humanity's greatest wounds and issues stem from this sin nature that's in all of us, man, what a relief, right? What a gift that we have this promise from Paul for us today, that where sin abounds, grace abounds all the more. And in your life today, if you just feel the weight of sin and it feels like it's just insurmountable, that just it continues to win and produce death in your life, the good news is it's God's gift. It is his free gift that outweighs that, that lifts you up, as the psalmist says, out of that miry clay, out of that pit, and puts your feet on solid ground. I'm grateful for that today, and we can rest in God's grace and what he's done through Jesus.